Several versions of this tale exist, but tonight I read to you the version most often heard around a campfire late at night. One night, many winters ago, a young maiden was preparing the evening fire as she awaited the return of her husband. He was a fearsome samurai, long gone in war. When the battles finally won, she was sure he would be most rejoiced upon the reunion. However, he did not return that night, or even the next. It was 5 days after news reached of the war's finale that he did indeed come back to Kumiko. To her surprise, though, he emanated a hateful aura. No words were spoken before he raised his blade to her and slashed the once beautiful girl across her face. The blood pooled and dripped. She held out her hands to her fresh wounds and cried out in agony. Her formerly doting lover now stood there, sword bathed in her crimson blood, and accused her of cheating. The samurai spat at her, seething with undue anger.
"Now no man will ever gaze upon you with want and lust,"
he sneered. Her injury refused to heal, and she eventually succumbed to bloodlust. The samurai did not seem upset at this, only staying farther and claiming it was her deserved fate due to her unfaithfulness. When came the night of her funeral, everyone remarked about her pale features, a once beautiful smile, now forever marred by ghastly scars, which seemed to form a somewhat mocking smirk. Today, we would call this a Glasgow smile or Chelsea grin. Rumors spread quickly. Not even a full hour after her service had begun, had the entire village come up with a fable that the samurai himself had been the unfaithful party in his marriage to Kumiko. This was, however, the true version of what had happened. He feared that she would leave him for a younger, more attractive man due to her unearthly beauty, so he took it upon himself to find her a replacement and save himself from embarrassment. That night, the samurai returned home and penned a letter to his mistress. As he were about to seal it, he heard a fearsome echo of what sounded like painful rasping. There were suggestions of choking, quiet coughing as though someone were afraid to be heard. Brushing it off, the samurai sealed his note and set it on the desk before readying himself for bed. It was his first and last night as a bachelor. He needed to look decent for the arrival of his mistress. As he lay down, there came the sounds again, but now they were louder, right outside his humble home, and now accompanied by a woman's soft crying. He were a samurai, not a doctor, and he needed to be well rested for when his new lover arrived in the morrow. Louder now, seemingly at his front door. He rolled over and closed his eyes. Now the sounds were right in his ear. The samurai snapped his eyes open, gasping in terror, to find nobody there after looking. A sigh of relief left his lungs as he laid back down, only for a hand to caress his cheek moments later. Startled, he sat up and gazed upon the masked woman in his futon. She looked familiar, but the bottom of her face was covered by a veil. You could only faintly make out the shape of her smile. "Am I pretty?" she whispered. By now he felt as though he were under a spell from her beauty. Unable to speak, the samurai simply nodded. At this, the figure uncovered her face and he screamed in horror. There next to him sat the spirit of Kumiko, still bleeding and still grinning. "Do you still think I'm beautiful?" Terrified, he could only sit there and stare. "Do you still think I'm beautiful?" Kumiko's ghost repeated. Her tone was light, voice floating in the air as though she hadn't truly spoken. The samurai convinced himself this was just some frightful nightmare. He smirked as he responded,
"I ensured nobody would ever find you beautiful again."
At this, Kumiko's spirit stood up from the bed and produced a large pair of scissors, cutting the samurai in half. Upon morning, when nobody had seen or heard from him, a young child ventured into the home to find him dead. Turning around to flee and get help, she was stopped in her tracks by a beautiful woman at the door. Hair as dark as the night sky, tied up so finely in a nice bun. Skin so much fairer than a freshly fallen snow, and eyes that seemed endless, her lips covered by a veil. "Am I pretty?" the older woman whispered. The child nodded. Kumiko lifted the veil, asking, Do you still think I'm beautiful? The child nodded. Again, the ghost produced a large pair of scissors. Then let me make you beautiful, just like me. The child screamed as he slashed her face, attracting a nearby adult, her father. He rushed into the home and immediately went to his daughter. Then his eyes fell upon what remained of the samurai.
Who did this?
The father demanded to know. Weeping, the child replied,
The slit-mouthed woman.